All right. Okay. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to another exciting meetup from Agile Leaders PH. I've seen a lot of new people. So for those who are new to this meetup, welcome. Agile Leaders PH, by the way, was created in support of Agile servant leaders in the Philippines and how they might be able to share insights, collaborate to grow and learn new skills, techniques, and strategies in order to create true and meaningful impact in their respective organizations. So before we start, we would like to thank, as always, John Estiles for helping us in regularly setting up the event, as well as to those who had been consistently attending the meetup since day one. We also have a Q&A and poll option. I think Brent posted the link earlier, but he could post it again for those who are interested. Not sure if Brent, you posted it again. Okay, I see you posted the Miro link, but the Q&A link is in Slido for those who would have any questions. Okay, so for tonight's session, we will be joining Richard Brillantes III, a consultant at PALO IT Hong Kong, to learn more about building a responsive, adaptable organization using evidence-based management. So in his talk, he will introduce the key value areas and the metrics that helps Agile leaders understand their product's journey through the lens of value and time and how these metrics impact the people doing the work. So that said, I hand it over to you, Rix.
Right. Thank you, Rad, for this introduction, and thank you for Agile Leaders PH for giving me this opportunity to present the stuff that I've been trying to learn for the past several months, and hope this would be useful in the journeys that you guys are having in your respective organizations and as leaders in the Philippines. So thank you for the people who have been sharing their expectations of this talk and their journey so far in their teams with their agility and how they are trying to achieve agility in their organizations. So a brief background for me, I'm a consultant currently at PALO IT in Hong Kong. I used to be an Agile coach and Scrum Master for Home Credit Philippines. I did a bit of work for NICE In Contact Philippines as a staff implementation manager. And previous to that, I was a web developer and Scrum Master for HSBC Philippines. So my details are there in the Miro board if you'd like to connect later on. But let's start the show. So we start with a quote, and we start with a baseline of how I would like to frame agility in our talk today, talking about evidence-based management and how this helps Agile leaders to help their organizations improve. And Joshua Partogi's quote here of the organization's ability to deliver value to its customers continuously is his definition of agility. And why this resonates with me is because of the experience I've had with delivering value. It didn't stop at the team. It moved the focus of agility away from just the team doing agile ways of working to an organization actually adopting agile values and principles and applying what they've learned as a complex adaptive system in doing better things together, working collaboratively, measuring the right things, and achieving goals together. So for me, it resonates very much for me that agility is an ability of an organization, and it's not a state. It's a means to an end in achieving value through the people doing the work. And with evidence-based management, we want to make sure that we are measuring value to enable improvement and agility. And as my objective for this talk, I want to be introducing EBM and sharing insights on metrics and the ways that we could use these metrics and practices to enable agility. And we would know if this is going to be a good talk if we see that people are actually thinking about applying some of these things that they're learning today into their work, into their organizations, and see if that would bring a better outcome for the people doing the work and for the organization as a whole. And when we're thinking about evidence-based management, This has roots in the late 90s when uh, the medical field was basically looking into evidence uh, to differentiate or to make sense of the information that they were receiving from patient data, from the diseases that were coming at the time, to other ailments, and making sure that the the treatments that they were making were actually making sense for the patient and were achieving the outcomes from a health perspective. And from there, it expanded into criminology, education, public policy, social work, and into management. And for evidence-based management, when it comes uh, to Agile, the earliest information I could get about this was from 2014, when there was a white paper that was created by a guy named Gunther Verheyen. And at the time, it only had three key value areas. But basically, what the paper wanted to achieve was to get leaders to focus on the right things to measure, and thereby presenting this white paper as a starting point of a framework for measuring value. And so for evidence-based management, it was really these three key things: measuring, diagnosing, and improving the organization's value through an iterative and incremental approach to guided change. And they wanted to achieve this by improve your outcomes, reduce your risks, and optimize your investments. We have a very quick question here right now, and I'd want for you guys to help me answer: what makes improving the agility of your team or organization important? What is it? Why is it important today for your teams? So let's spend like probably a minute for that. Okay, so we're seeing deliver on time, immediately give realistic results, happy stakeholders and end users, deliver values to end users, better response to change, adapting to a process. It's the trend. Happy staffs with positive cultures. The market is changing, managing resources, delivering value with the same mindset. So thanks for that. So let's spend another minute talking about what is the reality of how the team or organization's agility is measured. What concerns might you have about these measurements? So if you remember when the things that you had mentioned, so velocity, man days, predictability by measuring plan versus actuals, the optimized cycle time, the complexity of the feature, or the total number of productive hours in a 2-week sprint. So what happens when your team members are measured this way? And how do they behave as a result? So when we talk about reality, how do the people behave when they're measured this way? So we see people are stressed. People are saying that they're gamifying the system. The measurements are more important than the actual value. Cooking the books. Method adaptation. That's going to be a very interesting thing there. If you can provide or expand on that thought on the Q&A, that would be great, so that maybe we can have a conversation about that. People working like crazy. That's definitely not an agile principle. But I can see how that can happen given how they're being measured. And yeah, so people are focusing on the velocity, man days, deadlines, and the overtime, right? So the thing about that is that as leaders, we have to understand that measurement is a strategic thing by its nature. That when we ask people to do certain things, when they are measured against that, that's how they will pretty much behave. And there's been a lot of management books talking about this and trying to move our leaders away from this type of behavior. Because then you have to understand what is the focus of the improvements as a result of these metrics, and how we have to be able to make a clear connection how these measurements are contributing to the value delivery from a strategic perspective. Because then you would see these behaviors, you would see these the current reality that people are maybe working on too many things and are under very tight deadlines and are stressed as a result. And in this remote nature that we have right now, that might not be the best way to go. So we also come into mind the Cobra effect. For some people who might not know about this, this was during the time of colonial India when Britain was still in power there, and there was a huge problem with cobras being in neighborhoods and biting the people there. And so one thing that they did was they tried to incentivize the capture and killing of these cobras. So if you give me 5 heads of a cobra, I give you $2, for example, or £2. And the effect was it started to go down as a result. The number of incidences of cobras biting people, and then it spiked up. Or sorry, the number of cobras that were being captured were still spiking up, and this didn't make any sense until they found out that people were breeding cobras and then chopping off their heads to gain money from the government. And when the government learned about this, they shut down the project entirely. They shut down that rule, and guess what happened? The people who were farming cobras would no longer make any money with the cobras. They let those cobras go out into the wild, and you come back to the same problem. So let's keep that in mind when we're thinking about how teams are being measured and how they're behaving as a result. So with evidence-based management, we want the Agile organizations to basically frequently inspect the results, because inspecting your results limits your risk. And it limits your exposure to bad decisions, because then you can now pivot and change and do something else differently. And Agile organizations are known for being able to deliver value continuously. And their ability to deliver value continuously, examples such as Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, you name it, they can deliver value continuously in the orders of seconds, not just months. For some organizations, that might make sense. For some, it might not. But definitely, you'll need to really understand how valuable is it to your organization to be able to deliver value sooner rather than later. With evidence-based management, we also saw that leaders are able to manage their investments through return on investment by looking at, if we deliver this much effort to get this result, how much did we actually make, right? And very few teams are actually thinking about it that way. That they're challenging the features that they're developing based on the value that it will return to the organization. whether it's a short-term or a long-term gain. With COVID-19, it's very important for organizations to take advantage of opportunities that make sense from a strategic and a tactical perspective. And they would be able to do that if they knew how much value feature A versus feature B would be making, and how soon would that return come in, and how much effort would it take in order to do so. And for the benefits, it's really making decisions based on evidence. That based on what you know, you're able to connect it back to value, you're able to connect it back to effort, you're able to connect it back to your risks, and make decisions from there. And those decisions can either change the way you deliver value, you change how you look at your product, you change how you're able to innovate, and change how soon you'll get out to market. And you will notice that from the empirical approach. And this is a fairly high-level process that organizations can practice whenever they're trying to apply improvement to their measurements. So the empirical approach basically says, measure where you are right now, what your current conditions are, set goals based on those current conditions, start running experiments to change or improve that can run quickly, and then measure your effects either internally or externally. And then you inspect the results and adapt your goals and your next steps, and then repeat. And evidence-based management has roots with lean and agile development when it comes to the empirical process control, something that lean and Scrum have been trying to, Kanban and Scrum, as far as agile frameworks are concerned, are able to capitalize on. So you might be asking yourself, Richard, this sounds great and all, but can you tell me about a story where evidence-based management actually worked? And so we come across this case study from 2018, basically talking about a real estate technology company that applied the Professional Scrum Foundations course to their leaders and to some of their managers. And they ran it for about half a year. And they were still having problems with the delivery. They were having trouble with people focusing on the wrong things. There were some confusions on how the events were enabling delivery of value. So, for example, what does planning have to do with anything, when it comes to the work that we're trying to do? There was also a disconnect on the vision of the leaders and what the teams were executing. So imagine the leaders are saying, we will go to the left, and the teams are still keeping on going straight because that's how they are being measured, or that's how they're being incentivized. And they were also looking at the wrong metrics, that velocity was their performance metric, not value. So what they did differently was they had to reconvene the leaders and the managers and make sure that they had business outcomes defined outright, measurable business outcomes. They also spoke with their delivery teams and got regular feedback on the business outcomes that they're trying to achieve, and actually get pushback whether or not these were actually achievable and how soon that might be. And they made sure that they were communicating continuously to the entire delivery organization on the outcomes, on the challenges, on the roadblocks that the teams were encountering for the leaders to fix. And from there, they had a greater sense of awareness of what was important to the leaders and make those connections. And through evidence-based management, they were also able to get a sense of ownership, that these are the things that leaders feel highly, these are the highly important things that we need to be taken care of. And we can do that via XYZ and not ABC. And this transparency, this collaboration, and this turnaround of this organization led to some incredible growth for them. uh, judging from the gains and the increased client satisfaction that they received. Now you might be asking me, hey, why don't you tell us which of the EBM's key value metrics they used? I'm afraid I can't tell you that, because why would the competitor tell you the secrets of their metrics, right? What metrics are they focusing on? So it's really a journey, for a conversation for leaders in their organization to be focusing on the right measures and working towards that, as because that's how human behavior is. So we come back to our next quote. As agile leaders, how do we show up to support and remove obstacles, coach new skills, enable success to our teams, product owners in the organization? So please consider this idea that we manage the work, and less about the people. We come to another exercise, talking about the key value areas. And I need your help to match the Agile principle and the definitions to the key value areas. So we start with the definitions here at the bottom. So please pick one, match the definition to a key value area. The key value areas are as follows: current value, unrealized value, ability to innovate, and time to market. So please go ahead and be courageous, pick out the definition and match it to the title. Folks, I need you to pick out the definitions and match it to the key value area. Or you could also do that. You could also start matching the agile principles to the key value areas as well. And let's have a conversation about that real quick.
Just let you know, Richard, I think the mirror was frozen, or was it? Because we are still looking at the story.
Really? So let's spend about 1 minute here.
Yeah, looks to me the screen just froze. So
it might be your internet
it
connection. I can
might be a
see.
technical problem, because it's also the ones that is feeding to YouTube right now.
I'm seeing people move stuff around. Folks, I need someone brave to move the definitions to the key value areas. The four, what color is this? Green boxes. There you go. Okay. So do we have all the 12? All right, we have 2 more. So let's get those down to the key value areas board and let's talk about it. Excellent job, guys, by the way. So we'll start with the top right quadrant, which is the current value. And so again, this is more an introduction than anything else. And so let's go through this together. So the goal of looking at current value is to maximize the value that an organization delivers to customers and stakeholders at the present time. And so it should reveal the value that the product delivers to customers today. So you guys selected working software as the primary measure of progress and building the projects around motivated individuals as a principle that might build current value. It's very interesting. Next up, we have unrealized value. where you guys have provided me that this suggests the potential future value that could be realized if the organization could perfectly meet the needs of all potential customers. And how it is described further is that this is to maximize the value of the product that is not yet realized in the market. Uh, and this is over time. So this could be things, minor changes, or non-software changes. So for example, if you're doing promotions or if you're doing discounts, and the discount is a very small change to your system, and it's more of a marketing change, right? How do those two marry together so that you can actually derive more value from your product? And it's trying to answer several different questions about that. And it's really centered around how much value can we get out from our current product if we had invested more time and effort into it. And you guys are thinking also about, that's very interesting. You guys mentioned simplicity. The art of maximizing the amount of work not done is essential as a principle drives unrealized value. And that there should be face-to-face conversations that's happening when it comes to unrealized value. I'm not sure if the welcome changing requirements is supposed to be bridging both, but I do agree that when it comes to product-driven development, that welcoming changing requirements is important in order to adapt to what is happening for your product out there in the market today. Next up is unrealized value. And we've described it as the expressing the ability of the product development organization to deliver new capabilities that might better meet customer needs. So this is really how the organization and its teams deliver their products, whether it is their coding standards, their technical quality, the things that will enable them to deliver quality software out the door sooner or get feedback from the work that they've done so far. And it tries to answer the question of what is preventing your organization from delivering value, right? What are the problems that you guys are encountering that slow you down effectively, or preventing your customers from benefiting sooner rather than later? And lastly, the time to market. And you guys mentioned that this is the expression of the organization's ability to quickly deliver new capabilities, services, or products. And I'm glad that it resonates with you guys, that this is the highest priority item, that the highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software, or in our case, valuable products. And this is where being able to have sustainable development, being able to have working software frequently, and working together may be very important in order to get your have that conversation around delivery. And it's really minimizing the amount of time to deliver value, whether it's decisions, whether it's how big the changes are, or how well can you orchestrate as a team of teams or groups of teams that are working together to deliver value. So thanks for that. Another exercise for us right now is to now understand what kind of metrics would fall under these key value areas. So I invite you to take a look at the next area. And from what you've learned so far in the key value areas, try to match the metrics at the bottom with the quadrants at the top. So let's spend probably a minute there. So I'll give you a bit more time. So focus on the Agile metrics. Take a look at one of them and see where that might fit into the key value areas. Okay. So thank you for that. It's very interesting how what we've learned and how these apply to these things, to these measures and metrics, that they immediately had a connection with you. That how they are being described already immediately tells you a sense of where they might be in these key value areas. So let's explore them a little bit more on the next slide, where we would learn more about what they really, where they really fall under. And what I'd like to get insight from you guys is to select at least two that we could discuss, or maybe just one. Maybe if we're pressed for time. So I'll go ahead and move a post-it into the box if you want to discuss that real quick. If you have questions about it, or if how they would affect. And then some of this, just to let you know, are available in a website called agile-tools.io, where they have a metrics library to try to describe some of these key value area metrics as well. All right, so we have two here. So while we're waiting for the other ones, let's start with scope change. So basically, scope change from a product owner's perspective is trying to describe the unrealized value because of how the scope of your sprint is changing over time. That if you are unable to focus your team's efforts into delivering value, that scope change might be something that leaders could look at, or a product owner could look at and say, hey, let's focus on delivering value as a goal for the next sprint. And so organizing the team and the people around the team to focus on that and make sure that the scope of the work of the team is laser focused to that value that they're trying to generate, then you would now have that scope change be different as a result. Customer satisfaction gap is more an empirical process where if your customers, if you're doing NPS scores and they're at, let's say, 40, and the expected NPS score is around 60, then that's your gap. You have a gap about 20 points that you need to achieve, and you can now justify a feature to now try to increase those points by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points because you're trying to hit a particular objective from customer satisfaction. So that might be very contextual to what issues your customers are having when it comes to customer satisfaction for the product that you're making. So current value so again, NPS score is Net Promoter Score. That is a survey that's being done to understand the customer satisfaction at the end of a transaction or end of a purchase or end of an interaction with a product. Sometimes it's also being offered while a customer is viewing the product or is just using the product without even making a transaction, just to see if they are how satisfied they are with the product itself. For current value, revenue per employee, this is understanding the inputs and outputs for the product. So your current value being that if you have 100,000 employees and your revenue is this much, then you divide it by that. You divide your revenues um, by the number of employees you have, then that's your ratio, or that's the number that you have as far as keeping that product in your stable. So is switching to 1, 2, 3, 15 different projects at any given time, or trying to fight fires while trying to deliver a new set of features, right? That's more than one feature. Then you would see them focusing on several different things and nothing's getting delivered. Nothing's getting to the hands of the customer. So as a leader, you have to have those conversations with your product owners to understand how you might be able to support them, to try to remove these barriers, or to try to have the team to gain some semblance of focus to what they're trying to accomplish. So this might be a larger discussion on understanding what they're trying to accomplish, where their focus is, and how often are they switching between these things that they're focusing on within, let's say, a 2-week sprint. Similar to that, the ratio of investment to tech debt and new feature development in sprint might be similar to the scope change for unrealized value. That if the ratio of debt is too high, so there's too much tech debt, that will slow your teams from delivering value because they have to go back and go fix that, and that might also limit the functionalities of the new feature that you're creating. So for average time and sit and UAT, so consider how big of a batch of work is happening that is preventing your product to get out into the market sooner. If your SIT or UIT is not happening within the sprint as part of your definition of done, then is it a month from now? Is it 2 months from now? Is it 3 months from now? And then that's when you will learn if there are any problems from either of these things, from system integration or user acceptance. If that is something that your leadership and your product owners agree on, then that's where you are, right? Unless, of course, they think of, hey, can we make this smaller? Can we make the changes smaller so that we can get these out the door? Can we team up with you to have your user acceptance people work with the team within the sprint and actually look at the changes that they're making and provide sign-off before getting it out the door? Or is it an environment issue? Are you having too few environments to be able to perform user acceptance tests? Or are you having integration issues with other feature teams in your organization? So how can you now make it so that you have a team who is focusing on your integration, making sure that they are removing impediments from each of the teams when they're trying to integrate? And how soon can they do that? And how soon can they get those teams to done within a sprint? Lastly, work item aging. So this is the age of, for example, an initiative or a feature that's been in development in the pipeline for your teams or your organization. If the work item age is more than 30 days, for example, or 60 days or 90 days, I've seen organizations where they have work item aging for upwards to 200, 300 days, but no one's batting an eye. It could be that it's not, that it will take its sweet time and get out the door sooner. But then you have to consider the waste of time and effort for those things if they're just waiting for other things to finish, or if it's the scope has to be all of these things. So that could be a conversation for the leaders and the product owners of the organization to really understand how old items are, and come to an agreement to either accept that it's going to take that long, or start reducing scope for the product or for the feature that you're trying to release, because that's preventing you from getting out the door. All right. So with the work that the organizations are trying to do, and the people who are doing the work, it's very important that they know that they're doing the right work. So how can we do that? We can do that through continuous improvement. So with evidence-based management and continuous improvement practices, there are several ways that you can do this. So you selecting the key measures that you will work on, and trying to create a perfection vision for the organization as measured by these measures or these metrics could be very useful. Understand where you're coming from, your current state, understanding where your target state would be, and creating experiments to change either your processes, your tools, your practices, maybe even how your people are organized in order to get to that target state. There is a canvas called an EBM Canvas that could also help you draft your improvement and get you towards that direction. For organizations that are trying to put a wholesale change from top down, it's also useful to look at the improvement practices for your whole organization using all of EBM. So looking at your current value, looking at the key metrics in the current value that you want to focus on, how does that relate now to the unrealized value that will improve the current value? What are the things that will prevent your unrealized value from getting to market? And how soon can you get it out to market? And having those conversations and decisions around what changes or improvements the organization will make in order to improve the current value through the unrealized value of the product should start, and be able to kickstart changes, meaningful change in the organization. And then lastly, you can also look at, as a small team, if you're working with a small team and this is less, organizational changes are less of an issue for you guys, then you can look at, when you're doing Scrum, how can you use these evidence-based metrics to help? So looking at your ability to innovate when you're doing retrospectives, and then setting some improvements, action items from there, paying down your technical debts, and introducing DevOps practices into your development teams' abilities is also useful. That has to be a conversation between your product owner and the developers. Trimming your product backlog, that's a product owner conversation. And then reducing your batch sizes per sprint. How many items of work are you taking into the sprint as a team, as a Scrum team, also affects your ability to innovate. So one of the more controversial thing is the product owner. Is your product owner able to decide based on the features that they are trying to deliver and based on the value that the product is trying to create? And this is a larger conversation, and it affects your unrealized value. How can you get that to your current value and your ability to innovate? And then lastly, adding more autonomy to the Scrum team. So it's getting more and more controversial as you go down here, and it affects your ability to innovate by getting your Scrum team to be this really self-managing team where the members of that team are able to work on the product on these tough problems and not worry too much about and worry about the right things, basically not worry too much about velocity or story points, but actually if the plan no longer makes sense in our achieving the goal that we have set ourselves to do, what must change, and have that conversation. All right. So there are more tools for EBMs for leaders and managers when you're having these conversations on your improvement practice. Starting with the product strategy canvas on the top left, this is a conversation between maybe the scrum master, the leaders, and the product owner to try to really ensure that the product that they are creating or they've created and now are sustaining actually delivers value. And it having that conversation with the team, also with the developers also in that room, in the same room, also solidifies that idea of the work that they're doing is contributing to this much value this soon, with this many people. And connecting, having that relationship with the value you're creating makes it so much more important for the teams to do good work. Make sure that the conversations around that is healthy and can now have those constructive conversations where, if the product owner says, let's do feature A to achieve this goal, and the developers can now have a conversation and say, hey, instead of creating feature A, why not creating feature B, because we can get there sooner with less effort. Another way to help the product owner is to have a hypothesis of the work. And this could be expressed in your product backlog items. And you have an example here of how the hypothesis template might be used, where you try to keep it in very, not sorry, very solid numbers or solid details that you can try to measure later on. Another way that you could measure your improvement over time is Joshua Partogi's EVM dashboard. It's available online on agilitypath.com.au/tools. This is where this is more from a financial standpoint and from a product standpoint. And as product owners, it's very important that you are able to understand how your product is performing in the market, so that it also drives the conversations on what type of new value might you create, how soon can you get it out the door, and what would prevent you from getting it out the door sooner, and cost change into the organization to help you get that product out the door. And then for leaders who are looking at overall performance of the teams and the organization when it comes to improvement, then there's the spider map on in the middle right portion, where you can look at how the team has been performing since then, and you can have those conversations on what might be causing the dip in performance, and change, inspect, and adapt the organization as you see fit. So given this, that we come to the end of this talk. Thank you very much for joining me in this adventure. I have a final word for you guys tonight to consider as you close your eyes and think about the people that you're doing good work with. And if I also want to invite you to share your takeaways. What are the ideas that you want to explore more or have questions on? Maybe you could also put it into the Slido. What did you like about this talk? And what would you change about this talk? As always, there are resources that you can also explore as you go into your EBM journey. There are certainly a lot more to learn and explore about it. There are more case studies out there that talk about their transformation or their usage of EBM. And there are also some pitfalls when it comes to using these measures. So thank you very much for coming to my talk, and great to have you here.
Thank you, Richard. That's a very insightful and a little bit complex to digest, I would say.
It is.
Yeah.
The chat just blew up. There's like 50. Oh no, that's Brett just chatting. Okay.
Yeah, I think you can proceed with the questions on the Slido.
So we still just have 4 questions in Slido.
Yes.
Brent, can you tell us about the questions?
Hold on, let me just go around it. So, as you can see, the first question that is asked right now, we have 4 so far. And as we now move into the Q&A, and now we were 5, we're going to consider the first question to be, how might we measure being responsive to change? Can you see this?
One moment. I can't see it right now. Hang on. I'm looking at it. It's opening for
Yes.
me.
Mhm.
First question is, how might we measure being responsive to change? So that would be a conscious effort of actually logging a change that's happening within your organization and how soon it gets out the door. So it could be your work item aging, right? So if it's a feature or an epic that goes through your system of managing the work, how long does it take, right? And it could be that it's part of a larger set of features or epics that need to be delivered, and you could aggregate that. You could either aggregate the amount of time that it gets out the door, but it definitely needs to have a meaningful timing. So, for example, do you measure it by the time it hits your the updates to your customers' phones, or does it make more sense that since it's a new feature that we're supposed to derive value out of it, that we uh, watch the time when the first purchase is made using the new feature? For me, the latter makes more sense. And that means that you have to have telemetry built into your tool to help you understand when that first purchase is being made, or how many purchases are being made using the new feature, so that you can also see the lifetime value of that feature. That this is the amount of effort that and people that we had developed that feature, and this is how much the value of that feature has been so far, given the purchases that have been made, right? So that's one. That's some ways that you could measure being responsive to change. Uh, the time to market metrics are useful for that, and there's also the ability to innovate. That if there are things that are preventing you from innovating, how long does it take for those innovations to get out the door, and why? I hope that answered your question.
Thank you for the answer, Richard. And I think that's one interesting use case to know which one to use. Definitely.
Right.
All right. Perhaps we can then move on to the next question. And actually, this one is upvoted once. The next question would be, what is the exact use case or use cases of using EVM? I think one is the one that you provided as a case study, right?
Yep.
For one.
Definitely, a use case for EBM is seeking improvement from a whole organization perspective or from a small team perspective, and using the right measures to drive the right behaviors. So in my examples, I always mention that if we have a goal, can we achieve it in 10 steps or less, or 10 tasks or less, and not be fixated on the items that are to be done, but rather achieving the goal. And the use cases really are from a perspective of, is your organization finding the need to improve something, what is it that exactly, and can you tie it back to value? And if you can't tie it back to value, then guess what? The people will behave according to whatever you guys measure, whether or not it's value. And that's why in the at the start, I'm asking how teams are being measured, how organizations are understanding value delivery through using agile, and we're just showing a different way.
All right, sounds fascinating, Richard. And perhaps where could we get more instances where we could explore alone on what use cases could be used? Where do you have any resources for this?
So the white paper on the real estate software provider is at the resources and thanks frame for Miro. There's also Net Health in the Scrum.org webinar that talks about it. So yeah, so there are resources about that to learn more.
All right, sounds good, Richard, and give them the space to explore them in their ways. All right, sounds good. We're now going to move forward for the next question. Unless everyone has more questions, just feel free to add more to the Slido. All right, so the next one would be, how can you convince upper management of evidence-based management, especially when they have a waterfall mindset and are not open to change?
So some of these metrics, you can, if you're able to collect them, go ahead and collect them and present them to your leaders, or at least present them to your immediate leader, and have a conversation on aligning expectations on delivering value. And if there is congruence in how we're being measured to versus how we're able to deliver value. And through those conversations, if the insight is that, you know, the organization needs to be better at this, then at least that's part of the battle that's already been solved. At least you have one leader that's convinced that that help is needed in order to improve things. And so with the freely available information that you can gather, and with using the practices, using the metrics that make sense to help justify improvements, right? And also understanding what matters to your senior leadership, whether they're from a waterfall or agile mindset, and see where it would make more sense to them. What do they value? Being curious about what they value as far as the product is concerned and how the delivery is happening, and having that conversation should be a good start.
I personally find it interesting that value is relative, and you just have to figure out what differences could that, you know, that we have to explore together. Isn't
That's
it?
right. Yep.
All right, Richard. Wow. Let's move on to the last three questions. The question that I would like to throw here is, can we use velocity to measure value?
So
Did I got it right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Someone just an editor to that. All right.
I'll if I think about it from the base definitions of how I understand velocity, velocity is either a moving average or a 3-day average or min-max of the number of story points that got done by a team during a sprint. And done is potentially releasable. So depending on how your team are delivering software, your teams are either getting to done and just have a potentially releasable increment, or done where they're potentially releasable and also released to your customers sprint to sprint. So your velocity doesn't exactly equate to a measured value, but rather if the work that the teams had performed had value attached to them at the start. So if you had 5 tasks worth 100 points of value each, right? And you delivered 4 of them, so you have 400 points of value. And that's not a velocity of sorts. Hopefully that makes sense. So velocity is just counting how much work was done during a sprint on average, but not necessarily how much value was delivered to your customer. And that would have to be a conversation on how you would define value, how you define done, right? How do you separate deployment versus released, or being used by the customer, being consumed by the customer, right? It's a closer approximation to counting value, because it actually you had a transaction, you have a happy customer, your people are happy. That would be a far closer measure to value.
I think it also begs the question that value is not something just customer oriented. If we're gonna look at it from a stakeholder perspective, management, senior leaders, your peers would also see some value in the work that is being done.
That's right.
So
that's
if by any chance that velocity is considered valuable to somebody else, it might be a very interesting move to figure out why is that so.
That's right. That's right.
Because
Especially
it might cascade from somewhere else.
Yep. And people will behave accordingly. People will behave
Correct.
accordingly. So you'll see from like 50 points of average velocity to like 1,000 points of average velocity.
But we see that from time to time.
See that from time to time. And very few people know that the points actually don't matter.
Correct.
It's the delivery of value that matters.
Yeah. And I think this is one of the misconceptions that we're hearing a lot, especially if they are new to Agile. And even the managers are giving the wrong idea and implication on the velocity. It doesn't necessarily mean that the team having the more story points accomplished would mean they are better than the other team, you know? So this is one of the things that I always correct to the managers, because this gives a very negative connotation and some ill emotions towards, between the teams. So remember that velocity is composed of complexity, effort, and not necessarily the value that you're trying to achieve in the user story. So velocity is ideally used to predict the team's capability with the relative capacity.
Correct.
It has to be together, capability and capacity, because it's a very unfair gauge to say that this team is performing well without considering how much people they have in the team and the skills, the relevance, and their team dynamics, right?
Yep. And the complexity of the work,
Yeah. So it's very important that the managers know the details and the significance and the right application of using the velocity, because this is what I'm getting a lot when the organization is new to Agile. So never ever be mistaken with when do you apply velocity and what's the significance of using the velocity. It's never ever used to measure the value of the team, just to keep that in mind.
I think it has a lot to do, at least in how I see it. It's a very seductive metric because it's easy to measure.
Yep.
So it does, and because of that, it makes it quite an interesting case to explore.
Yeah.
All right. So we pretty much have some time for that question. And if by any chance who answered this question find that they have their question satisfied, if not, follow up with another one. We'll move on to the next question. The next question would be also by anonymous is, does measuring plan versus actuals a meaningful metric to measure predictability?
I think if you are looking at a team as a feature factory, yes, that you're predictable in delivering what the sprint backlog or the product backlog is asking you to deliver. But it doesn't tell you how much value you're delivering. It could be that you cook the books and you break down the work of, we started with 5 and then the actual is like 20. We must be doing good, right? We're predictable in the sense of, oh, we're actually doing more work versus a team that says, oh, we start with the 5 tasks and we finish with 5 tasks because we didn't break the work down. That's predictable, right? Um, Meaningful, I think, will be very different meaning to whoever you're asking. What ball are they looking at? Are they looking at the ball of keeping people busy, or are they, or um, you are able to transform the way people shop, for example?
Right. Thanks, Richard. Anyone who would like to offer some insights for this as well before we move on? This is not, well, if not, then we could proceed. Okay, we have 2 more questions. One just come up just a while ago. The next question would be, can benchmarking produce evidence?
I think so. So in the lens of EBM and in the practice of EBM, you start with where you are, and be clear on where you're headed as far as the benchmark is concerned. That this benchmark is trying to measure some form of value that we will try to achieve in the next 2, 3 years, 5 years. And this is where we currently are. And from that benchmark, say something about where you're headed, what targets data you are. Are you trying to reduce something? Are you trying to increase something? Are you trying to, what improvement are you trying to do based on that baseline? And the baseline is, I would imagine, be made up of data that is reflective of your current situation. So yes, it's evidence.
Right, Richard. Now I'm going to close the question. And on to the last question that we have for this session. Is the fixation of velocity over value a reflection of the culture of the people and or the organization? Powerful question.
It is a powerful question. And whatever the people or the organization fixate on is a reflection will reflect on what they do and how they work. And so if you see organizations that fixate on velocity, it may be that there is, like what Brent said, that's an easy, very seductive number to measure versus anything else in that EBM key value metric list. But if you work at an organization that already has a product, some of those measurements are already available. It's just a matter of connecting those dots, understanding where you are, understanding where you're headed, and make that a shinier target for everyone to rally around. And that's what we saw with the case study, that people were focusing on the wrong things, and there was a disconnect between what the leaders were trying to achieve and what the people were trying to do. And by making it very obvious and very transparent to the entire organization that these are the things that we need to accomplish and these are the measurements that we're trying to improve, then people rallied around those, and I would imagine had conversations centered around those and actually caused change in the organization to improve things. So Ben is also asking, is a more interesting question is whether that culture can be guided to change its way of thinking. And yeah, communicating to management who might be fixated on what they grew up with. And so a lot of people, have been successful so far doing the things that they have done so far. And
I think having that awareness doesn't mean that there's desire.
Might be. Now we have to build that desire, right? We have to make it a shinier target and place emphasis on that and appeal to either their emotional or rational sides of their brains, that by focusing on a different target, that things might be better for the organization as a whole, because then we will see these things happen. And these are the things that we're trying to measure, right? If, for example, do our leaders care about if the people are happy, the people who are doing the work happy with what they're doing? How much overtime are they encountering? How long does it take for work to get out the door? What are the problems that the people are encountering in doing their work? What's getting in their way? What's slowing them down? How much work do they have on their plate in order to deliver value? And might be what intrinsic value from a behavioral perspective would be needed in order to cause change? Is it courage? Is it focus? Is it respect? Is it commitment? So yeah. Oh, we have more questions.
Yes, we have more questions. Hold on, let me just cut the other card first. All right. The next question would be, if we want to measure the value of the product, do you only measure once it's already in prod and being used by the users?
So it could be that you also try to measure the value of your competitors' product, so that you might have a focus on either leapfrogging or matching or undercutting or approaching the problem from a different perspective. So I think, and that's where with current value, also look at how much value the product has, and maybe how does it compare with market share, or what are the published values for your competitor's product, right? How many people do they have? How much money are they raking in? And see how can you now compete with that. Can we share this video with our leaders so that they
Hold on.
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry.
Thanks for preempting, Richard. Hold on.
Can I add to that?
Yes, please go ahead.
All right.
Yeah, because I don't think it makes sense. I mean, how can you measure something that is not yet out there, right? So my thought is, you can only measure something that is being used. But if you would want to validate a potential feature of
Mhm.
your product, then you can do some user validation or
Mhm.
usability testing,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
But if you're aiming to get the absolute value of something that is being used already, then obviously it has to be out there, not in UAT
Yep.
phase. Yeah, so it has to be
Yeah.
in production. It has to
Yeah.
be in live environment.
So what another thing that you made a very interesting point, and one other thing that comes to mind was Dropbox. When Dropbox made their product public, they didn't come to the public with a polished product. All they had was an email address or an email invite and a video showing what the use case was, how it looked like. And back then, we didn't have broadband internet like at a gigabit speeds, and so file transfers were commonplace. And all they had to release, right, was not the product itself, but the idea of the product, and that made it. And they understood how much value that product had in the market at the time.
And so I guess for me, my argument would be, what's the context of measuring the value? Is it going to be just to test it out, or you really want to measure how much absolute value is it giving to your customers? So it depends. No?
It does. Yeah. It does. And to add to that, it could be a hypothesis, right? That if we build this product out, this is how much we think it will make. And then rationalize it to, because it's in a greenfield territory, we already have a captive market, it's actually building on top of other products that we have, it's going to cannibalize other products in the market. That's the deal.
Yeah, so it's a good question.
All right. Thanks, Austin. Thanks, Richard. And finally, the last question would be asking whether this is something that you would like to open source, I guess.
So
Yeah, feel free to answer. For me, it's yes. It's
I
already
think it's a
YouTube.
yes. It's a yes. Either we have this as a recording, or we have
I
that
don't think it does,
conversation.
but it's actually live
Yeah.
in YouTube. So
Yeah, it is live on YouTube, so you can just have them go
you're
through
forever
it.
on the internet right now, Richard, and us.
Yay. So yeah, I think that's fine. That's fine.
I probably think it might suggest that it's the Miro board that would be shared, but maybe that's another thing. Maybe to the person that asked this question might probably differ whether it's the Miro board that you would like to request, and maybe that's something that you could have a conversation with Richard afterwards.
Yeah, we could probably do that, or maybe just release the related links to the YouTube. There's another question on the chat with Andre's channel.
Wow. Okay. Seems to me that there's a lot of questions on the Zoom chat. Could you guide me, Richard, as to where it is?
So Andre said that somehow I see agility as an art. Am I wrong? It's bugging my mind. So agility is about the people really doing the work and how can they perform well with each other, and what practices, tools, behaviors do they bring to the table when working with other people in pursuit of value delivery, or making the world a better place, for example. So yeah, it is an art. It's an art as far as getting people to work together and help each other out. But there is a science behind it of cognitive science, behavioral science, statistics, and a lot of work that's been done for the past 20 years trying to understand and trying to make things better.
And it's a mindset. Don't forget.
It is.
And it becomes your way of life as you get used to it and you apply it on your, at least on my personal experience. When I became more obsessed about different kinds of, because the framework is more of studying and application, but when you come back at home at the end of the day and you get used to that kind of agility, somehow it becomes your way of life. So I think it's more than considering it as an art and a science. I've seen a lot of people who have like been coaches like 30 years and they have businesses. They are not in the professional network anymore, but when they talk about how did agility actually helps them improve and succeed in their lives, that's when I realized that Agile is more than a framework or a technique in the workplace or particularly in the software development. That's my personal insight about Agile.
Thank you, Austin, for the insight.
So maybe that's that's how old I am right now, the feeling of, oh my God.
I don't think it's suggestive of your age, Austin. You might pick it up from somebody else.
Yeah.
Some grace there, right? Okay, so it looks like we don't have any more questions. It seems exhausted. And what we can do is transition the remaining time to Rad to do a bit of what's going to happen next.
Okay, so thank you again, everyone, for attending. So the next session that we would have our very own Brent to do the session. So this is, Austin, do correct me, October 2nd or October 7th? So
wait,
I forgot
let me
actual
verify. Oh my God, my calendar is Very toxic. October 5,
The
Brad.
first
October
week of the
5th.
month, right?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so it's October 5 for Tuesday. Yeah, it's a Tuesday, correct.
And
Yep.
we hope that everyone would be attending the next session with Brent. So Richard did set up quite the benchmark for the quality and the number of attendees for the
Yeah.
session for this year alone. So thank you, Richard, for gracing us with your knowledge. And for everyone who is interested in evidence-based management, I did share this in the chat. So this is from scrum.org. Evidence-based management, you could download the guide. It's updated as of last year, I believe. So please do read up. It would be great if everyone here in the Philippines, or at least wherever you are, could apply this to your everyday work. So it applies not only to management. So if you are a Scrum Master, a product owner, or a practitioner in general, this is very valuable for Agilists. Okay. So
Brad, perhaps we could also invite the people to see if they would like to answer the polls for what questions and what
right.
topics that we would like to have. So we'll be opening the poll on the same Slido, and if you could already see it, it should pop up right any moment now. So if that's working, feel free to add something, and let's spare some moment in time to figure it out, what topic that you would like us to talk about, or probably a speaker that would like to to be part of the group. We're more than happy to recruit some, of course.
So anyone who has a topic in mind or who wants to share a topic, we could actually schedule you. So a lot of us started with this group doing talks. A lot of the people that we see in big brand talks, SoftCon, those talks with PMI. So a lot of them started here in Agile Leaders as well, and we're very proud to be a part of that. So if you are interested in suggesting a topic or maybe doing a talk yourself, please feel free to reach out to us, Brent, Austin, myself, Johnny, or Arvin. So I'm not sure, Brent, we have the Slido.
We're looking at one right now. So after a while, so for those who are staying, thank you for actually staying until this far, and we're still going to vote for it for those who decided to say, hey, this topic is really interesting, and I might have picked something. I will probably pick something up from here. So we'll do a bit of like a voting. So we're still seeing like only a single entry right now, as far as I can see.
So could we share the link in the chat? Okay.
Fair enough.
It got lost in the chat. There it is.
Oh, all right.
Thanks
for the cover up. Okay, we have 2 topics more. Sample activity, scaling Agile, maybe. And magic and dangers of deviating from frameworks. All right. Perhaps the deviation is by itself a framework. It's a deviating framework. So hold on. How many more minutes do we want before we close the poll, guys?
So maybe a minute more.
All right. Okay, so for those who wrote that, you are now held accountable to figure out whether that is something that you would like to explore as a topic as a speaker, or you want to outsource that to us to figure out who can be the appropriate speaker for the topic. We'll figure that out. Three, four, five, six. I'm looking at 6 right now. 3, 4, 5. Right. So, okay. So, Rad, would that be all right that we close the poll?
Yeah, I guess
Okay,
we
I'm now
could
going to deactivate the poll right now, and then we're going to show up with the votes. Can you see if you could vote right now, at least in Slido? You don't have to leave the Slido page. It will just refresh on its own. Can you see it? Is it working?
Yes, I just voted.
Oh, thank you.
Yep. Oh, I'm seeing a tie.
Yeah, we've got a tie. Interesting. Triple tie.
Triple tie. Ah,
There's one
yeah, it's a
outstanding.
tiebreaker right there.
I'll be a tiebreaker right here.
So for that person who asked if there's an Agile 101 or something for beginners, please do feel free to reach out to us rather. We could assist you, like regardless if it's gonna be a talk or an ongoing mentoring or coaching session.
I think, Rad, they can also join us in our Facebook group, so they can
Yep.
even let me ping it here. Give me a sec. We have a Facebook group, actually, Agile Leaders PH chapter. But I don't know how to share this one. But
So I'd shared the, oh, my bad. So I shared the link to the Facebook group in the chat. So
oh, cool. Thanks. Yep. I'll approve it. Give me a sec.
oh, we have a tie again. Who wants to play tiebreaker? Like if there's
Well,
no,
I guess
like,
at some point the talk that I'll be making has some overlaps with pragmatic and agnostic agile, nonetheless. So, oh, there you go. Somebody just broke the tie. This is for the talk. Sample activities. All right, so I guess we could now close the poll. It's taking some time.
yeah.
Right, so let me just close it. Oh, somebody's catching up. Right, so let me just deactivate the poll right now. Let's see the result. Oops.
Did we miss anyone?
Okay, it looks to me that we got 22% for the activities for Matrix. Just in case people want to see, I don't know if you're seeing it in the Slido because I closed it, but I just put it on the chat. Just in case I might have done this in accident. Okay, looks like it worked again. Thank you.
We see it in Slido and in the chat.
All right, so it looks like we have a winner, but we can reconsider whether that's really something that we would like to do. There's a guarantee for that, right, Rad? Austin, just to check out, right? So
yeah.
Okay, fair enough. So that's all for me.
Yeah.
And I will now give the grant to you, the both of you. Cheers.
Thank you, Brent.
It's awesome.
So it's rather interesting. So the next question would be, who suggested the topic? So I'm not sure if there was an option for Brent to see who suggested that. So maybe that someone could either do the talk or nominate someone that they do have in mind to do the talk.
I think we can talk about it offline.
Okay.
If there would be anyone who would be interested to speak, you would want to volunteer for this specific topic, just let us know. And if none, we'll figure it out who will be the next speaker, and then we'll keep you posted on the meetup.com app, LinkedIn, and in our Facebook page. That's the Agile Leaders PH Facebook group that Rad just shared with everyone. So we sincerely hope that you enjoyed our session. And please try to invite more friends to participate, or, nothing to lose, no harm in listening and learning something new. So you can probably wrap up, Brad.
Okay.
But just take note of the topic.
All right.
Yes, we were able to take note of it. We don't have a speaker yet, but yeah, we'll get back to everyone on that. But do reach out to us for any questions that you might have with regard to the topic, or for any future topics or opportunities to do talks, right? Okay. So we do have a couple of people left, like from 36, we're down to 26, or 38, we're down to 26. So thank you for sticking up to the end of the presentation, and we do hope to see you again. Thank you again, Richard. It's one of the best presentations we've seen to date. And we do hope that you would grace us again with your brilliance and your presence.
Thank you, Rad.
It's
Thank
in
you for-
the it's in the name.
Thank
It's
you,
in
The
the
name,
name.
Richard.
yes.
Wow.
So it's a play on the name.
Thank you, guys.
So thank you, everyone, and see you next month. And excited for the next talk with Brent.
Yeah.
On the
Stay
5th.
safe, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Do take care.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
Bye-bye.